And Fred, of course, I like to stay in our lane here as this relates back to the markets. And European stocks just posted a 7% drop this week. Their worst since March of 2020, and they're absolutely bearing the brunt of this right now.
Look, Ukraine is in Europe, and that is what Ukraine wants to be, is European. So we have to watch Europe very closely. Europe has not been a geopolitical actor since World War II, really. And it's now stepping up for the first time as a geopolitical actor. You're seeing the Germans doing things that none of us could have expected a couple of weeks ago. The move to 2% of defense spending, a special defense investment of $100 billion, the freeing up of selling weapons to Ukraine, the shutting down of Nord Stream 2 as an opportunity. Nobody could have expected that. But the question is, can this mark the end of European ambivalence in general toward being a geopolitical actor, because we're going to be faced with this authoritarian challenge, not just for days and weeks, but for months and years. And so I think that's the real big question. Sure. The other question people are asking is, will they move to sanctioning of oil and gas in one way or another? And right now, I don't think you see any point in that direction. But if the atrocities become more apparent, if Russia really escalates even further than it has, I think there will be more public pressure on Europe to act.
But that's where the rubber hits the road, Fred. I mean, this is where Angela Merkel left office with over a 70% approval rating, and yet was the person in some ways responsible for Germany's dependence on Russian natural gas here. I mean, what should we look to Europe to do, given the prices that they're paying right now, to ensure that they have energy security for the decade to come, if they are going to take this more muscular stance against Russia?
The transition is going to take some time. You've got a majority of the coal for Germany coming from Russia. You've got 55% of gas and the majority of oil. Italy gets 40% of its gas from Russia. So this will not change overnight. So they just have to understand this dependence is a geopolitical downside, and they have to fix it. Over the short term, there's also the question of weapons. There are MiGs, Suhois, different bombers that are in the European Union, but the eastern part of it, can that reach Ukraine on time? There's a great need for javelins. There's a great need for drones. Mainly that's coming from Turkey. Great need for Stingers. Can that get to Ukraine on time? The longer that this is extended, the more it's going to help Ukraine. But in the meantime, Russia is making progress. It's making slow progress. It's making ugly progress. And we're all watching whether they go what people are calling full Chechnya, whether they really double down and send everything in their military might at Ukraine, which would turn it much nastier even than it is now.
If the Europeans are spending more on defense, if they're spending more on energy, at least for now, where is that money coming from? What are they spending less on? I doubt they can increase taxes or do anything more on that front, can they?
The taxes are pretty high in Europe. As you note, the growth is not particularly fast. What they can do is they can ease their debt levels. The European Union has set debt levels at a certain level. The Germans are already moving in that direction, and you can certainly lighten that up for a while to get to 2% of defense spending and above. But you're right. There's not a lot of room to do things in the long run unless you're changing certain things structurally, for sure.
And where does this leave the U.S., Fred? So I've heard investors who actually are recommending exposure to European stocks for the long run right now because they like all of what you're describing that is taking place there, the way that they're spending more on defense, that they've come together to some extent. But what about the U.S. in the meantime? We're pretty insulated from everything that's happening. Does that make us a relatively stronger performing economy, or do we still have to kind of worry about more commodity headwinds?
So I think we have to worry about commodity headwinds. 7% of our oil comes from Russia. There's no chance that the U.S. is going to cut off that unless the Europeans act, and it doesn't look like the Europeans are going to act for now. What's positive is we have not worked this closely with this sort of unity across the Atlantic for a long time. You could imagine a trade and investment deal growing out of this, maybe a green a green technology deal. Some people are talking about that. So far, Republicans and Democrats alike haven't liked trade deals very much, but I don't know how you compete with China and Russia, but particularly China, if we don't start opening our minds more to trade deals. And I think if you see European defense spending going up, those are sectors where one would be smart to invest. because I think it's inevitable that defense spending in Europe will go up in the wake of all of this.